The early morning light crept softly across the farmer's land, casting a gentle glow over the dewy grass and rows of crops. Out there, in the stillness of dawn, he felt a calm that he had come to treasure. A peace that softened the edges of his quiet, solitary life. Each morning was the same. He would walk the perimeter of his property, checking for any signs of trouble, making sure everything was just as he had left it the night before. But this particular morning was different. As he rounded a corner near the edge of his field, he noticed something strange nestled in a patch of wild grass. A cluster of eggs, unlike any he had ever seen. They were dark, almost black, with an unusual shine that caught the morning light in a way that seemed almost unnatural. He approached cautiously, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth as he knelt down to get a closer look. The eggs were cool to the touch, smooth and glossy, as though they had been polished. He counted 4 in total, each about the size of his palm. What puzzled him most was that he had never seen any bird or animal on his farm that could have laid something like this. The eggs looked almost like stones, yet their texture was unmistakably organic. As he ran his fingers over their smooth surfaces, he felt an odd connection to them, as though they had been placed there for him to find. He hesitated, glancing around to see if there were any signs of a nest or a creature nearby. But the only sound was the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant call of a morning bird. After a moment's thought, he gently gathered the eggs into his hands, cradling them carefully as he walked back to his farmhouse. A small thrill of curiosity sparked within him, a rare feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if these mysterious eggs had pulled him out of the rhythm of his routine, introducing a new sense of wonder into his otherwise predictable life. Once inside his farmhouse, he arranged a soft bed of hay in an old wooden box he kept for odds and ends. He placed the eggs inside, adjusting them until they were safely nestled, and then set the box in a warm corner near the stove. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of anticipation, as though he were waiting for something extraordinary to happen. And deep down, he had a feeling that these eggs held a secret, a mystery that only time would reveal. Over the following days, the farmer found himself drawn to the eggs, checking on them frequently, his initial curiosity only growing stronger. He had once raised animals on the farm, a memory now somewhat faded, but the instincts came rushing back as he carefully monitored their temperature, adjusting the straw bed around them with the gentle touch of someone who cared deeply. As he went about his usual chores, his thoughts often drifted back to the eggs, wondering what lay inside. He even found himself reminiscing about the simpler days of his youth when he and his father would care for the animals together, tending to their every need with quiet devotion. Those memories, usually locked away in the back of his mind, seemed to come alive as he watched over the eggs, filling him with a sense of nostalgia he hadn't expected. At night, after finishing his work, he would sit by the stove, the box of eggs resting at his feet, casting shadows against the flickering light. He'd lean forward, gazing at them intently, as though they might hatch at any moment, revealing some unknown marvel. In those moments he felt as if he were a young boy again, filled with the same sense of wonder he had felt when exploring the forest or discovering a hidden creature in the wild. The more time passed, the stronger his connection to the eggs grew, as though he were bonding with whatever lay inside them. His heart softened in a way that surprised him, opening to the possibilities of what these eggs might bring into his life. He wasn't sure why he felt so attached, but he knew that these small, mysterious orbs had already changed something within him. In the quiet hours of dawn, just as the first light began to stretch across the horizon, he would find himself standing over the box, feeling the warmth that radiated from the hay. Each day brought a deeper feeling of anticipation, as though he were preparing for an arrival, waiting patiently for the moment when the mystery would finally reveal itself. But the waiting didn't trouble him. In fact, it filled him with a peace he hadn't felt in years. For now, he was content to watch over the eggs, his heart carrying a tender hope that whatever came from them would somehow change his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. Days turned into a week, and the farmer's attachment to the eggs only grew stronger. Each morning, he'd rise before the sun, warming himself by the stove while checking to make sure the eggs were still safely nestled in their bed of hay. The calm warmth from the wood stove seeped through the old farmhouse, filling it with a coziness that had long been missing. The eggs seemed to bring a certain liveliness back to his quiet life, their mere presence sparking a rare excitement he hadn't felt in years. As the days passed, he began to notice small changes in the eggs. They no longer lay as still as stones. Every now and then, a gentle quiver would ripple across their glossy surfaces, as if something inside was stirring, trying to push its way out. The first time he saw one of the eggs twitch, his heart skipped a beat. What kind of life would emerge from them? He was filled with questions, none of which had easy answers. He decided to take extra care of his unusual discovery, treating the eggs as if they were something precious. Memories of his childhood surfaced often during this time, especially of days spent on his father's small farm, helping to care for the animals. His father had always emphasized the importance of respect for all creatures, and those lessons resonated now more than ever. One afternoon, as the farmer tended to his usual chores in the barn, he felt a wave of anticipation wash over him. Though it was unlike him to take breaks in the middle of the day, he couldn't resist the urge to check on the eggs once more. He left his tools by the haystack and made his way back to the farmhouse, his steps quickening with each stride. Inside, he knelt by the box, watching closely. One of the eggs gave a faint tremor, the shell twitching as though something within was attempting to break free. He held his breath, captivated. Though the moment passed as quickly as it had come, he knew that this was only the beginning. Soon, the eggs would reveal their secrets. As he waited, he found himself talking to the eggs, something he would have thought odd if it hadn't felt so natural. "I don't know what you are," he murmured one evening, leaning down close to them, "but I'll make sure you're safe. I'll give you the best start I can." Each day brought a growing sense of purpose. His routine, once driven by habit, now felt charged with meaning. The field seemed brighter, the chores lighter. Even the animals on the farm seemed to pick up on his elevated spirits, following him more eagerly than usual. The quiet life he'd once known felt richer, filled with the promise of whatever lay inside those mysterious eggs. Despite his best efforts to keep his secret, curiosity in town began to grow. A few neighbors stopped by under the guise of borrowing tools or checking on the farm, casting sideways glances around his home, their eyes lingering a little too long. Word spread quickly in the small community, and whispers about the farmer and his peculiar find soon made their way to the local cafe. Yet, he kept the details to himself, protecting the eggs from prying eyes and unwelcome attention. There were days when he wondered if he should call someone, perhaps a specialist or even a nearby wildlife center. But the thought of handing over the eggs to strangers felt wrong. Deep down, he felt they were his responsibility, that they had come to him for a reason he couldn't fully understand yet. This feeling of purpose, though strange, filled him with a quiet confidence. As the days wore on, he made the eggs the center of his attention, rearranging his day so that he could spend more time with them, telling them stories from his past and humming old tunes he remembered from his childhood. It became clear that these eggs, mysterious as they were, had begun to fill a part of his heart he hadn't realized was empty. Even the long nights seemed shorter, his sleep more restful, as if the anticipation of what was to come had breathed new life into his dreams. He often found himself dreaming of lush, green landscapes, of creatures he couldn't recognize roaming free under open skies. Upon waking, he would carry a peaceful feeling with him into the day, as though he had been given a glimpse of some hidden truth he couldn't quite grasp. Late one night, he was jolted awake by a faint sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping from the direction of the eggs. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he rose and crossed the room, kneeling beside the box with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He realized that one of the eggs was vibrating slightly, a soft, persistent tremor that seemed almost purposeful. It was the first sign that something within was finally stirring. As he reached down, placing a gentle hand on the egg's shell, he felt a warmth radiate through his palm, a sensation that reminded him of a heartbeat, faint but steady. His heart swelled with a tenderness that surprised him, a feeling he hadn't known in years. The connection he felt with the small, unseen life within the egg was unlike anything he had experienced before. A soft smile crossed his face, and he whispered, "Soon. I'll be here when you're ready." The words hung in the air, a quiet promise as he returned to bed, his heart full of anticipation and warmth. The day finally arrived when the farmer's patience and care would be rewarded. Early one morning, as the first light of dawn crept through his window, a small but unmistakable crack sounded from the box by the stove. Startled awake, he threw back his covers and rushed to the eggs, heart pounding with excitement and a hint of fear. Each of the eggs lay still in their nest of hay, but he noticed a tiny fracture on the surface of one of them, a delicate line snaking across the shell. He knelt beside the box, watching as the crack slowly expanded. Another faint tap echoed from within, followed by another, as the creature inside seemed to test its strength against the shell. With each small sound, the farmer's anticipation grew, his eyes never leaving the egg. He whispered softly, urging the life within to keep going, to break through. A few minutes passed, each filled with the sound of gentle cracking, until finally a tiny beak pushed through, followed by a scaly little head. The creature blinked in the light, its small, curious eyes meeting the farmer's gaze. He gasped softly, overcome by the sight before him. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen, a small, dark-scaled bird-like being with soft down covering parts of its body, and yet it had a certain reptilian quality as well. The little one peeped softly, stretching its tiny wings as if testing them for the first time. In that moment, the farmer felt a surge of affection, a connection that went beyond words. He extended a finger slowly, and the creature leaned toward him, nuzzling his hand as if seeking warmth and comfort. One by one, the other eggs began to crack, each releasing a creature as unique as the first. They were similar in shape, each with dark, glossy scales and soft down, but slight variations gave each hatchling its own distinct charm. Some had lighter spots on their wings, while others had brighter, curious eyes that sparkled as they took in their new surroundings. The farmer watched in awe, feeling as though he were witnessing a miracle unfold. He carefully lifted each hatchling from its shell, gently placing them back into the box and wrapping them in fresh hay for warmth. His hands moved with a tenderness he hadn't known he possessed, his heart swelling with a pride and joy he hadn't felt in years. As the hatchlings settled in, their soft chirping filled the farmhouse, a symphony of new life that echoed through the quiet morning. The farmer couldn't help but smile, marveling at their beauty and innocence. He realized that these creatures, born from the mysterious black eggs, were not just animals to him. They had become a part of his world, and in some strange way, a part of him as well. Days passed, and the hatchlings grew quickly under the farmer's watchful eye. He found himself dedicating nearly every waking moment to their care, preparing small meals of seeds and fruits, which they eagerly devoured. Their bond grew deeper with each day, as they responded to his voice, following him around the farmhouse and even attempting to mimic his gestures. One morning, as he was cleaning their box, he noticed that one of the hatchlings, the one with the brightest eyes, had started to develop small, shimmering feathers along its wings. They glistened faintly in the sunlight, casting tiny rainbows that danced across the walls. The sight took his breath away, reminding him once more of how unique these creatures were. In the evenings, he would sit by the stove with the hatchlings nestled around him, sharing stories of his youth, memories of the farm, and tales his father used to tell. The creatures seemed to listen intently, their little heads tilted, as though absorbing every word. For the first time in years, the farmer felt a deep, abiding happiness, a sense of purpose that filled the empty spaces in his heart. He began to notice the impact of their presence on the rest of the farm as well. The animals, who had always been calm yet distant, seemed to gravitate toward the farmhouse, drawn to the warmth and joy that now radiated from it. Even the birds, usually cautious and wary, would perch on the windowsill, chirping softly as if in conversation with the hatchlings. As the days turned into weeks, the hatchlings continued to grow, their feathers thickening and their tiny wings strengthening. The farmer sensed that they were becoming more independent, readying themselves for a life beyond the safety of his home. This thought both warmed and saddened him, a bittersweet reminder that one day they might leave him. Yet, he found comfort in knowing that he had given them a safe start, a foundation upon which they could thrive. One evening, as he sat with the hatchlings by the fading light of the stove, a particularly bold one stretched its wings, hopping to the edge of the box. It looked up at him, tilting its head as if to say goodbye. The farmer's chest tightened, realizing that the time might be near for them to go. He reached out, stroking its small head, feeling a pang of loss mixed with pride. "Don't worry," he murmured softly. "You'll always have a place here." The little creature chirped in response, a sound that resonated in his heart as a promise of gratitude and connection. He knew that, whether they stayed or flew away, the bond they shared would remain, a quiet, unspoken understanding that life had brought them together for a reason. The farmer slept peacefully that night, the warmth of the hatchlings a gentle reminder that he was no longer alone. And as he drifted into dreams filled with memories of family, of laughter, and of love, he knew that whatever lay ahead, his life had been irrevocably changed by these small, extraordinary beings. As the days passed, the farmer's connection to the hatchlings grew stronger, filling his days with moments of joy and discovery. Every morning, he would wake to the sound of soft chirps and tiny wings flapping as the creatures greeted him eagerly, their eyes bright with recognition. The hatchlings had become an integral part of his life, each one a tiny bundle of warmth and wonder that he cared for as though they were his own kin. Their bond reminded him of a time long ago, back when he was a child on his father's small farm, surrounded by animals he loved deeply. He recalled how he and his father would spend hours caring for the creatures, making sure each one was fed, sheltered, and healthy. Those memories had been buried beneath years of solitude, but now they surfaced easily, filling him with both warmth and an aching nostalgia. He would sometimes catch himself talking to the hatchlings as if they were old friends, sharing stories of his childhood and his father's lessons. "My dad used to say that every creature has a purpose," he told them one evening, as the hatchlings nestled close to him by the warmth of the stove. He said that they each bring something to the world, and it's our job to help them on their journey. The hatchlings chirped softly in response, as though they understood every word. The farmer smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. He realized that caring for these creatures had reignited something within him, the desire to nurture, to protect, to share his world with others. The farm, once a place of solitude, had become a sanctuary of life and connection. One evening, as he sat with the hatchlings gathered around him, he noticed how they had grown. Their feathers were fuller, their wings stronger, and their eyes sharper, watching his every movement with keen intelligence. They were no longer the fragile creatures he had found in those mysterious black eggs. They were maturing, readying themselves for something beyond his farmhouse. A pang of sadness tugged at his heart as he realized that their time together might be nearing its end. He couldn't imagine the farm without them, the silent comfort they brought and the joy they had given him. Yet, he knew that keeping them forever would mean holding them back, denying them the freedom they deserved. Love, he reminded himself, was often about letting go, about allowing others to grow and fulfill their purpose. Each day, he prepared himself for the possibility that the hatchlings might one day leave. He watched them as they practiced spreading their wings, hopping from one spot to another with a confidence that seemed to grow with each attempt. They were learning quickly, becoming more independent, more attuned to their surroundings. And with each new skill they mastered, the farmer felt a bittersweet pride, proud of their growth, yet painfully aware that it meant they were one step closer to leaving him. His connection with them was unlike anything he had ever experienced. They had become more than just creatures on his farm. They had become symbols of something deeper, reminders of love, family, and purpose. The farmer often found himself reflecting on the mysteries of life, the strange twists and turns that had brought him to this moment. He thought of how he had found the eggs by chance, hidden away in a forgotten corner of his field, and how they had transformed his life in ways he hadn't thought possible. In a way, he felt that these creatures had come to him for a reason, that they had filled a void he hadn't realized was there. His days had once been a blur of routine, each moment predictable and unchanging. But now, every morning held a new discovery, every evening a quiet reflection on the beauty of life's unexpected gifts. The hatchlings had awakened something within him, a part of himself he thought he had lost forever. One evening, as he was preparing their evening meal, he paused to watch them, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. He realized that his journey with them had taught him more than he could ever have anticipated. They had shown him the power of patience, the beauty of nurturing, and the joy of seeing another being grow and thrive. They had reminded him of what it meant to care for someone, to cherish the time he had with them, and to prepare himself for the moment when he would have to let them go. That night, as he sat by the stove with the hatchlings nestled around him, he whispered a quiet promise. "When the time comes," he said softly, his voice barely more than a murmur, "I'll let you go. You deserve to see the world, to live your lives, and I'll be here, cheering you on wherever you may go." The hatchlings looked up at him, their bright eyes shining in the firelight, as though they understood his words, as though they too were preparing for the day they would part ways. And as the farmer sat there, surrounded by the creatures he had come to love, he felt a peace settle over him, a quiet acceptance of life's impermanence, and a gratitude for the fleeting, beautiful moments that had changed his life forever. As the hatchlings continued to grow stronger and more agile, the farmer faced a dilemma he knew was inevitable: the decision of whether to hold on or let them go. Each day, he witnessed their wings lengthening, their muscles strengthening, and their instincts sharpening. They had outgrown the cozy box near the stove and were constantly fluttering around the farmhouse, exploring every nook and cranny with an insatiable curiosity. One morning, he opened the door to the farmhouse to find them gathered by the threshold, their small bodies poised as if ready to step into the world beyond. They tilted their heads toward the open fields, sniffing the fresh air and glancing back at him, as though waiting for his approval. The farmer's heart ached as he watched them, their longing for freedom as clear as the dawn light spilling across the hills. He knew that he had given them everything he could within the walls of his home. They had grown under his care, nurtured and safe, but they were wild creatures at heart. To keep them any longer would mean denying them the life they were meant to experience. Yet, the thought of saying goodbye was a pain he hadn't prepared for. It was as though each of them carried a piece of him, a small fragment of his heart that he couldn't bear to part with. As he watched them gaze out into the open fields, memories of his past drifted through his mind. He remembered the days he had spent roaming the countryside with his father, exploring the woods and fields, feeling the thrill of freedom with every step. His father had taught him that love was about giving others the freedom to be themselves, to grow, and to pursue their own paths. Now, standing in his father's place, he understood the weight of that lesson more than ever. The hatchlings seemed to sense his hesitation, chirping softly as they hopped back to him, nudging his hands with their small heads as if to comfort him. Their gentle touch brought him back to the present, filling him with a bittersweet resolve. He knew what he had to do, even if it meant facing the loneliness that would surely follow. That afternoon, he decided to take them to a special part of the farm, a quiet grove of trees that bordered a wide open field. It was a place he had often visited as a child, a place that held memories of freedom and wonder. It seemed fitting that this would be where he would bid them farewell, giving them the gift of open skies and endless possibilities. With the hatchlings nestled in his arms, he walked slowly to the grove, his heart heavy but determined. When they arrived, he knelt down, placing each of them gently on the ground. They looked up at him, their bright eyes filled with curiosity, as though waiting for his guidance. He smiled through his sadness, feeling a sense of pride as he saw how strong and capable they had become. "You're ready," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This world is yours to explore. Fly as far as you can, as high as you dare. I'll always be here, watching over you from afar." One by one, the hatchlings took hesitant steps forward, glancing back at him as though reluctant to leave. He knelt there, his hands resting on the earth, as he watched them stretch their wings, feeling the breeze for the first time. The first hatchling, the one with the bright eyes and shimmering feathers, looked back at him one last time before taking off, its wings beating strong and steady as it rose into the sky. The others followed, each one lifting off with a grace that took his breath away. He watched as they soared higher and higher, their silhouettes growing smaller against the wide expanse of blue. A deep sadness welled up within him, mixed with a profound sense of pride. They were free, just as they were meant to be, and he knew he had played a part in giving them that freedom. As the last hatchling disappeared into the distance, the farmer sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the sky. He felt the emptiness of their absence settle over him, a silence that was both painful and beautiful. They had left, but they had also given him something invaluable, a reminder of life's cycles, of the beauty of connection and of the courage it takes to let go. For a long time, he stayed there in the grove, listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds overhead. The world around him felt vast and alive, filled with possibilities, just as it had been in his youth. And in that quiet moment, he felt a peace he hadn't known in years, a calm acceptance that he had done the right thing. As he walked back to the farmhouse, his heart felt lighter, filled with gratitude for the time he had shared with the hatchlings. Though they were gone, their presence lingered in the air, in the quiet corners of his home, and in the memories that filled his mind. He knew that he would carry them with him always, a part of him forever changed by their brief, beautiful existence in his life. In the days following the hatchling's departure, the farmhouse felt different. The quiet felt louder, each room filled with the echoes of chirps and soft rustlings that no longer accompanied him. Yet, despite the hollow feeling in his heart, the farmer found a surprising peace within himself. He had given the hatchlings a start, a safe place to grow, and ultimately, the freedom to be what they were meant to be. This realization brought him comfort, even on the loneliest days. Life resumed its steady rhythm on the farm, though the routine felt lighter somehow, as if those tiny creatures had left behind a new warmth in their absence. As he tended to his animals and worked his fields, he would catch himself looking at the sky, wondering where they were, if they had found their way, and what adventures they might be having. There was a sense of connection between him and the world beyond his fields that he hadn't felt before, a sense of possibility and renewal. One crisp autumn morning, as he prepared to mend a fence on the far side of his property, he noticed a movement in the trees at the edge of his field. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the swaying branches. But as he looked closer, he realized there was something, or someone, watching him. His heart quickened as he walked closer, and then he saw it, a familiar shimmer in the sunlight, a glint of feathers he recognized immediately. It was the first hatchling, the one with the bright eyes and shimmering feathers, now fully grown and magnificent. Its wings were broader, its stance confident, and as it gazed back at him, he sensed a familiarity and understanding that brought a lump to his throat. For a moment, they stood there, watching each other, the quiet connection between them stronger than words. The creature let out a soft chirp, and he felt his heart swell. It was as if it had returned to show him that it was safe, that it remembered him, and perhaps that it missed him too. He held out his hand, and to his amazement, the creature took a step forward, bowing its head slightly as if in recognition of the bond they shared. In that moment, he felt a surge of pride and joy, knowing that it had come back, even if only for a brief visit. The hatchling, now a majestic creature in its own right, stayed with him throughout the morning, following him as he worked and watching him with bright, attentive eyes. It perched nearby as he mended the fence, hopping from post to post, as though helping him in its own way. The farmer talked to it softly, sharing stories and memories, laughing at the creature's curious glances as it inspected his work. As the day wore on, a few other figures appeared on the horizon. The farmer's heart leapt as he saw that the entire group of hatchlings, now grown and thriving, had returned to him. One by one, they landed around him, each displaying the unique characteristics that had defined them since their hatching. Their feathers had taken on colors he hadn't expected, rich hues of blues, greens, and even a hint of red, their beauty magnified by the sunlight that danced on their wings. They surrounded him, chirping and fluttering their wings as if to tell him their stories. Though he couldn't understand their language, he felt their gratitude, their joy, and their bond with him as deeply as if they had spoken to him directly. The sight filled him with a happiness so profound that he felt tears pricking his eyes. The creatures he had cared for, the lives he had nurtured, had returned to show him the beauty they had found in the world. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fields, the creatures gathered close, their heads bowing toward him in what felt like a gesture of thanks. He reached out to each one, stroking their feathers and murmuring words of love and pride. The creatures stayed with him until the last light faded, and he knew that this moment was their way of saying farewell, a final goodbye, filled with gratitude and remembrance. When they eventually took flight, he watched them go, feeling a bittersweet ache as they disappeared into the darkening sky. But this time, his heart felt lighter. Their return had given him closure, a reassurance that his love and care had made a difference. The creatures were free, thriving, and beautiful, a testament to the power of kindness and the bonds that transcended words and understanding. With a final wave, he turned back toward the farmhouse, carrying with him the peace that their visit had left behind. That night, as he lay in bed, he dreamt of open skies and soaring wings, of laughter and chirping that filled the air, and of a life touched by the simple, extraordinary act of love. In the days and years that followed, the farmer continued his quiet life on the farm, but he was never truly alone. Every so often, he would catch a glimmer in the distance, a flash of feathers, or the sound of soft chirping on the wind. And he knew that they were watching over him, the creatures he had set free, a part of his heart forever bound to them. Though he lived out his days with the solitude he had once known, it was now filled with warmth, memories, and the knowledge that love could transform, heal, and create bonds that lasted a lifetime. And as he worked the land and watched the seasons change, he would often look up to the sky, smiling at the thought that somewhere out there, his feathered friends soared high and free, carrying with them the love and lessons of a humble farmer who had once found his purpose in the quiet act of giving. In the days following the creature's heartfelt visit, the farmer found a deep sense of peace settling over his life. The empty nest he had felt when they first left had transformed into a profound joy, knowing he had been part of something truly special. The echoes of their last visit lingered within him, each memory a reminder of the joy they had shared and the lasting impact they had left. Seasons came and went, and the farmer continued his quiet routines, each day shaped by the lessons the creatures had left behind. He found himself more connected to the world around him, noticing the small wonders of life with a newfound appreciation. He no longer saw his solitude as emptiness, but rather as a space filled with memories, purpose, and the wisdom of a life shared with creatures he once set free. As the years passed, word of his story spread through the nearby town. Visitors would sometimes stop by his farm, curious about the tale of the strange creatures and the kind farmer who had taken them in. The farmer would greet them with a quiet smile, sharing his story only with those who truly wished to hear, passing on the lessons he had learned about love, freedom, and the courage to let go. In the final season of his life, the farmer felt no fear, no regret, only gratitude for the journey he had walked. On warm summer evenings, he would sit on his porch, gazing at the skies, often catching glimpses of distant wings as if his beloved creatures were still watching over him. And in his heart, he knew they were. His story, like the bond he shared with them, became a part of the land he had cared for, a legacy of love that would endure long after him. For in the quiet acts of kindness, in the freedom he had given, and in the courage to open his heart, the farmer had truly left a mark on the world.